Okay, guys.
Hello.
Hi. Just give me a second, Lily.
Hi.
Hi.
All right. So, welcome, welcome, Dan and Patrick. For our, there's an indie game for that. So take it away, guys.
All right. Thank you very much, Lindsay, and special thanks to your little assistant there for keeping us amused in the green room there as we were starting up here tonight. So, welcome everybody. Hello, my name is Dan the Video Ninja, and we are here for the 1 o'clock gaming panel entitled "There Is an Indie Game for That." I'm joined in Puyo Puyo Tetris Land by my partner in crime, Tricky, over there, who's going to be providing us with some visual aids as well as probably making faces at me when I'm not looking and such and so forth. So get ready for that. So we're how this panel is going to run is we're going to be talking about some AAA games, and we're going to also be talking about some indie games that go along with those AAA games. So for those of you out there who have burned through all of your Zeldas and your Dark Souls and whatnot over the course of the last year or so, we're going to maybe discuss some indie titles that can possibly tide you over while we're still getting through all this stuff. Also, special thanks and appreciation to the mods for keeping track of the chat for me here as I get through my spiel. So, how this panel is going to work is we're going to be going through a list of different topics here. We're going to be showing you some visual aids, talking about the indie games along with them. In between each topic or so, I might take a break or whatnot just to keep myself hydrated, which you all should be doing too, because if you are anything like me and you got worn out by that workout this morning that everybody totally did, right? Yeah. Then you should probably also stay hydrated. Also, feel free to jump into the chat if you have questions or anything like that throughout the presentation. We'll see if we can maybe take a brief pause in between each title that we're going to be talking about and maybe addressing one or two of the questions. Can't promise that we'll get to all of them, but maybe if there's time at the very end of the panel, we'll maybe field a few more of them. Plus, I'm probably going to be in the Discord, the Kanji Discord, which is, you should all be checking out as well. Throughout the entire weekend, you can probably find me in the video games discussion or the TV discussion or anywhere on there. So if you want to talk more games and whatnot, definitely hit us up over there for all of that. So that's enough for the preamble. Let's get into the amble here. There's an indie game for that. Hit us with that first slide there, Patrick. So, those of you in the chat, how many of you guys like Dark Souls? Let's get some love in the chat for Dark Souls, shall we? Immensely popular, the Dark Souls series has become one of the most widely beloved AAA atmospheric 3D person hack and slash action series, to the point where, much like so-called Metroidvanias, it has even been co-opted as a gaming genre in its own right, with games that include challenging die, retry loops, often being referred to as Souls-like, or the Dark Souls of their franchise. Well, there's an indie for that. If you guys like Dark Souls, you should try Hollow Knight. What translates from this mega series from a couple of years ago are the many same design aesthetics as well as the ever-beloved thrill of overcoming meaty action challenges. The sense of being a lone warrior tasked not with saving a once vast but now cursed and decimated landscape, but simply enduring it, translate well between Dark Souls and Hollow Knight. Though there are a few overall objectives, you'll often be left on your own to explore as deep as you dare into the world's many darkly beautiful corners, driven mostly by your own sense of curiosity and a thirst for a mighty challenge to overcome. Hollow Knight trades up a little bit of the 3D dodge roll combat loop for more of a 2D jump and slash action, but there's still countless bosses and mini bosses scattered throughout the world of Hollow Nest, which is the world that Hollow Knight takes place in, that'll put your skills to the test. A defeat usually means a loss in resources as well as a reset back to your last safe haven to try again and again and again. And should you succeed, there's always going to be the next bigger and tougher meanie just around the corner ready to take you on. So with several free DLC expansions There's quite a lot of it, of this game, since it's been out for a little while. They all offer even more challenges and secrets to discover. Hollow Knight offers hours of 2D Souls-like gameplay to discover and overcome. It has hauntingly beautiful hand-drawn art and sound design that renders the creatures and environments very much in the same dark and beautiful Dark Souls atmosphere. It's available on all platforms, and those of you who know the game and have already played, or anything like me, that have played it to death, be on the lookout this year, because I believe Team Cherry, who are the developers of the game, have a sequel called Silksong coming out later on this year. That's our first one. Let's toss it over to you guys in the chat while I take a quick hashtag drink it break here and see what you guys think. Hollow Knight is very fun. Yes. The animation is good, and the art style, it's all hand-drawn art too. Very, very, very well done. So again, I'll remind everybody, if you guys want to toss any suggestions of games that maybe some of these games remind you of, or any questions about the games that maybe we're talking about, throw them into the chat while I'm yakking away there, and the mods or whatever might curate one or two of them for us to answer along the way as we go through this presentation. Or if you feel like just holding it all until the end, we're probably going to get to the end and have some time left over to field a little bit of free roaming discussion and whatnot based off of all the topics that we're talking about here today. There's also a fun Hollow Knight randomizer community. Yeah, those of you who are into that kind of thing, for sure. So let's go on to the next one here. Patrick, you got that next slide there? How many of you guys are fans of Portal? It's got to be at least one or two fans of Portal out there, right? Let's get some love in the chat for those of you out there who are fans of Portal and Portal 2, I suppose. Though it started as an afterthought, Portal quickly became one of the most popular breakout spin-off franchises of the Half-Life series, and its sequel only catapulted it even further into the realm of quirky puzzle game superstardom. What really made the gameplay of Portal stand out was its unique mechanic and how it was applied to a series of lateral puzzles for the player to solve. Well, with that in mind, there's an indie game for that. If you guys are a fan of Portal, then what I might suggest is you try out a game that has exactly the same kind of gameplay feel, along with a similar sort of sneak out of bounds narrative that players can find in the title that we have, known as Superliminal. Superliminal, the idea of this game, Superliminal, is that instead of darting from place to place through holes in the wall and the floors, what you're doing now is you're changing the size and geometry of objects just by moving them around in 3D space. Everything in the game resizes itself based on the player's perspective, and it only takes a few short introductory rooms to pick up on the game's unique mechanic before you're shifting blocks, doors, and even entire buildings around in order to progress. The narrative also attempts to capture that Portal-like sense of the player using all the tricks that they've been taught to slip through the cracks of the level design and explore behind the scenes of the unusual and very much in this game sort of dreamlike levels. The sense of being dreamlike is kind of baked into the narrative a little bit too. Superliminal will scratch the itch of anybody looking to spend more time trying to wrap their heads around fresh new 3D logic puzzle mechanics. It's kind of a short game, much like the first Portal game was, and the soundtrack's phenomenal. It's got more of a jazzy soundtrack than like kind of the contemplative, sciencey sort of soundtrack that Portal has. But it's much more comfortable, I think, to just sort of settle into and like leave you and to sort of think your way through some of the mind-bending puzzles. It offers a great setting and whatnot, and you can really sort of think your way through it. And it's a different way to sort of think through a lateral sort of puzzle type game. Sadly, though, probably still won't get any cake. That's Superliminal. What you guys think? Superliminal looks so good. It does. It looks pretty phenomenal. It's very lightweight and very, very mind bendy and really good stuff. Everything makes sense in a way. Yeah, like when I was describing it may not make sense from the visual materials that you're seeing on screen there. But I promise you, once you start playing it and you've like had some of the puzzle pieces in your hands for a little bit and been able to resize them, it just clicks in. So it may look intimidating, but don't be intimidated by a game like that, because once you get into it and you start figuring it out, you'll amaze yourself at how much you're able to figure things out, and you'll feel really, really smart in doing so. So on to that next slide. Hit us up there, Tricky. And we got any fans of Doom out there? Let's get some Doom hype in the chat. I'm going to go out on a limb here and assume that even those of you who aren't fans of Doom know what Doom is, like, or you've at least brushed up against it, and its ubiquitous influence in the first-person genre since it broke out in like the 90s. Wasn't it at one point more popular than Windows in terms of installed on most machines? Yeah, so most people know what Doom is, I think. But it's that influence, really, that gave rise shortly afterwards, after its initial explosion, that is, to the so-called Doom clones. I think, actually, the term Doom clone might even predate the term first-person shooter. And Doom clones are popping up continuously to this day. Case in point, there's an indie for that. If you are a fan of Doom, you should try Proteus. Proteus is available now on Steam in early access, and it doesn't even try to hide that it's aiming for that same exact Doom clone territory. It's a stripped-down throwback to a time when first-person shooters were nothing more than firing endless rounds into dangerous mobs of monsters and soldier ghouls, all while hunting through maze-like techno-fortresses, searching for door keys and power-ups, all beneath the pounding soundtrack of driving heavy metal guitar riffs. And it's awesome. What's unique about this particular indie brand of ripping and tearing is that the developers went out of their way to use present-day technology and gaming quality of life design sensibilities to effectively recapture the look and feel of a 90s shooter with, you know, alias textures, 3D scanned character animations, kind of like what they did in the very first Mortal Kombat. We'll get to that, by the way. But they married it all to modern gaming comforts and modern gaming sensibilities. So you get, 60 frames per second high frame rates. You get mouse look, which the original Doom never had. You get quick save and quick loads. All that stuff that we expect in, the 2010s and 2020s for modern games to have. So the result is a bloodbath of bullets and carnage that feels and plays as fast, as smooth as we all think we remember the games like the original Doom and Quake and all those things feeling and playing when we were gaming in the 90s. It captures everything exciting about painting levels red with Monster Jam that we come back to again and again since the old days. And it really sands down all the rough edges to make the experience familiar, yet easier to digest for today's modern Monster Hunter and Demon Slayer. So Proteus is, like I said, out on early access on Steam right now. It's only got maybe a couple of hours worth of content, but the developers have promised that they're going to be dishing out more and more of it throughout the year or so leading up to the full release of it. So if you're looking for some good old-fashioned ripping and tearing and whatnot, I suggest you check that out on Steam when you get the chance. Proteus is so pretty. It's pretty in that sort of disgustingly pretty sort of sense. Like, if you can get behind the idea of horrible, horrific gore and blood and guts looking pretty, then yeah, absolutely. That's what the game has in spades. Last time I played Doom was in 95. Well, you are then due for a top-up, I think. And what better to do than to jump into an early access game? For sure. So, moving on. What do we got next? All right, so any fans of God of War out there? My boy Kratos. Oh, yeah. I'll be honest. I think most of you probably know where we're going with this one in terms of what indie title we're talking about, but sit tight. We'll get there. It's probably going to be one of the easiest sells since most of you have probably already played it, but nevertheless, for the maybe three or four of you that haven't still tried the game that we're going to be talking about, know that, it's not just, you don't always have to go back to Kratos every single time you need a new infusion of chiseled Greek rage case hopping from deicide to deicide. Romanticized renditions of Greek mythology go hand in hand with quite a lot of gaming franchises, especially God of War. It's mostly, but in those games, it's mostly the juicier, well-known monsters and larger-than-life figures that get all the spotlight. Especially in Greek mythology, you're usually talking about like Zeus, Minotaurs, Medusa, Ares, Cyclops. Those things always pop up. And they usually show up with whatever their biggest weapon is, or their showiest power, or their most infamous axe, and that's usually the spotlight. That's why Kratos is always fighting, gods and monsters and all that stuff as bosses in most of his games. But of course, there's an indie for that, and like I said, most of you are probably way out ahead of me on this one. But if you like God of War, you should definitely try Hades. Supergiant's little indie masterpiece, Hades, is rocking the same kind of angle. It's half dozen bosses or so are big names in the Greek pantheon as well. Least of all, the main villain, who's right there in the title. But those looking for a little more, I'd say, character in some of these characters from these old myths will likely find the abundance of dialogue exchanges in Hades quite refreshing from just the usual trading of proclamations of defeat and war cries over and over as you play through the story. You'll get a greater sense of who each of these characters are as you visit Hades' domain, Mount Olympus, or the various realms that you traverse as well. Actually, I don't think you go to Mount Olympus in Hades. Anyway, it doesn't matter. And each of those, and you'll get a sense of what each of those characters that you meet along the way mean, not only to the main character Zagreus, but also to each other. You can weave yourself in and out of each of their stories through conversations alone between runs, which informs the fast-paced roguelike action and adds texture to all the carnage and bloodshed. So it's a bit of an adjustment from just the screaming rampage of Kratos' adventures and whatnot. But the depths of exchanges, verbal or otherwise, that Zagreus goes through his repeated escape attempts is what you're really going to find to chew on in this game, because they're all wonderfully voice acted for starters. And there's, like I said, just so much of it. So if you came for big adventures and deep dives into the worlds and mythologies of the source material, as well as the interpersonal turmoil and melodrama. Let's face it, it's pretty much melodrama. I mean, this is Greek mythology, that all those characters exist when, then the Son of Hades very much makes for a compelling complement to the Ghost of Sparta. So that's Hades. That's my sales pitch for Hades, that game that everybody has already played to death. There's people in the chat right now that are apparently playing it right now, which is awesome. And of course, let's not forget that there is also the opportunity in the game to pet the three-headed doggo. That can't not go mentioned. Not go unmentioned, I should say. That's Hades. Moving on to the next one. What else you got there? Let's move on to the next one. Ah, yes. Little series that maybe some of you have played, known as The Legend of Zelda. Any fans, by any chance? Maybe one or two? Okay. The storied journey of the Legend of Zelda franchise, from its humble beginnings in the mid-'80s to the present day, has seen the tale of a boy, a girl, and usually a pig man take many shapes and sizes. There are so many legends at this point that just about everybody who's played a video game can name at least one or two of them that they can remember fondly. So among the many hundreds of games, indie or otherwise, looking to live up to the spirit of adventuring, dungeon crawling, and grand worlds to explore, believe it or not, there's an indie game for that. If you are a fan of The Legend of Zelda, you might want to try out Minute. Minute is likely one of the smallest offerings that we'll be talking about today. It's a 2-hour minimalistic experience that aims to borrow the top-down slash and explorer gameplay, chiefly remembered from the handheld Zelda games like Link's Awakening and those two games, the pair of games on the Game Boy Advance that I can't remember the names of, Oracle of something or other. You guys will correct me in the chat. But there's an additional spin on Minute, as they also work in a little bit of that Majora's Mask time loop mechanic in there as well. See, in Minute, you have 60 seconds to perform any task before the game basically zaps your character dead and sends you back to the last save spot that you went to. Now, any equipment or power-ups that you discover are yours to keep from run to run, but other than that, the world effectively resets itself each time your minute is up. This turns time into another resource, much like health and magic power, that you'll need to manage as you plan your actions around, kind of like it was in Majora's Mask. Though the time limit kind of prevents the game from having the deeper puzzle box dungeons that were the signature of most of Link's adventures, it's more the surface exploration and side questing that you'll find yourself needing to mentally map your way around each time you strike out for another 60 seconds. Much like all those dungeons, there will be keys that you need to find and doors that you need to unlock using those keys. So in that sense, you can kind of think of the entire world of Minute as like one really big Zelda dungeon to kind of solve. So if it's the quest to find your way through a winding maze of the world and its mechanics it operates under, that brings you back to each Legend of Zelda title, more so than the plight of the characters or the ancient lore of magic triangles or whatever, then Minute can offer you a bare bones version of that same challenge on a smaller, quainter scale on just about, I think it's on every platform that plays video games. So if you're looking for something a little bit more bite-sized, I would check out Minute, for those of you looking for that kind of stuff. Rags, you're not wrong. Half Minute Hero also kind of rocks the same vibe in that it's kind of just trying to blast you through the game a little bit fast or whatever. So Half Minute Hero might also be another one that you might want to check out for sure. Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons. That's those two games I was trying to think of. Yes. Are you going to play the new Minute Racer game? Yeah, the developers also made another game kind of like it, except they weren't aping Zelda stuff. They were doing like a card building racing type game. I don't know. Look into that. That might be something else to check out. Maybe if Zelda games aren't your thing, but you still like the idea of like a minute by minute gameplay loop, maybe you might check that out. On to the next one. What have you got here? Oh, we got any fans? I told you we were coming back to this. Any fans of Mortal Kombat? Get those Mortal Kombat quotes in the chat for everybody here. It's got to be some fans of Mortal Kombat. It can't just be me, for sure. Mortal Kombat, of course, is a champion of the one-on-one fighting game genre, stretching all the way back to our roots as gamers, and it is still as big now as it was then for pretty much the same reasons. Mortal Kombat is where we all go when we feel like it isn't enough for us to just throw hands or Hadoukens or whatever to whittle down our opponent's health bars. No, what we have to do in Mortal Kombat instead is go one step further by slicing our opponents in half or knocking their heads off or setting them on fire and just have a bloody good time doing it, for sure. As the one-on-one fighting game genre has progressed over the last 30 years, though, since the original Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter and all those one-on-one fighter games that it started out as, more and more thought keeps going into how to make the jam spraying tasks of the combat a little bit more engaging. So it's stuff like combo systems, like if you're a fan of more combo specific games like maybe Killer Instinct, for example, or if you're more a fan of like the Marvel versus Capcom type games with all their various meters that you fill up to do special moves and whatnot, or even just in most of fighting games these days, all the sophisticated finger gymnastics that you have to pull off in order to pull off all the moves and whatnot. There's an audience out there for all of that stuff. Like some people get heavily invested on it. There's tournaments about being the best at learning all those intricacies to make all your characters do all the cool stuff and whatnot. And that's not, there's nothing wrong with that. That's awesome. And if people are big into that, more power to them. But what about the rest of us who maybe aren't so enthusiastic about learning 600 billion finishing moves and whatnot, or maybe we just don't have the dexterity to pull that off, or maybe the accessibility to pull all that stuff off? What do we do in those cases if we still want to get in on all the one-on-one combat excitement and whatnot? Well, there's an indie game for that. Surprise, surprise. If you're a fan of the Mortal Kombat series or any one-on-one fighting game in general, you might want to try out Needhog 2, or possibly the first one, although Needhog 2 kind of makes it a little bit obsolete. Combat junkies might find something about Needhog 2 as an easy substitute for their bloodlust. It may look a little slapdash from the gameplay footage that you're seeing here, but it's a lightweight indie sequel that streamlines the die again, try again, match after match mayhem of squaring off against another opponent into a lightning fast, more tug of war type gameplay series that still manages to paint the battleground with all sorts of juicy colors. It may be only one hit kill, like there's no life bars in it. Every time you hit your opponent, they just go down. But the thing about it is that you're still going to be punching and stabbing and slashing and doing all kinds of the wonderful violence that we all love and enjoy, dotting eyes with arrows and whatnot, smashing skulls into the dirt. That's all in there. But the best part is you're like 1 or 2 seconds away from your last kill or death before the next skirmish starts right back up, because as soon as you put your opponent down, you've got maybe 1 or 2 seconds to gain a little bit of ground into their territory before they respawn and the fight is on yet again. So Nidhogg 2 is as no frills as a bloody one-on-one fighting game gets. Both fighters are equal, despite whatever goofy outfits you put them in. There's no unique moves from character to characters for you to learn. All you can do is basically just slap silly hats on them or whatever, and that's it. So you've got really nothing to master in terms of gameplay mechanics other than, get a sword and aim at the other guy. That's pretty much it. But for such a tiny little indie game package, you're likely going to get just as hyped over the lengthy matches as you would like if you were watching a Marvel vs. Capcom tournament or a Mortal Kombat streaming tournament or whatever. So if you're looking for that level of excitement without having to spend hours upon hours learning all the input moves and whatnot, check out Nidhogg 2. I promise you, Tricky and I have played it together on stream at some point. Quite a few points in the past, and those matches have gotten heated and very excited and very loud. So it's a great time if you got a pal that you like going up against. And like I said, you don't want to go through all the rigmarole of learning all the moves and whatnot. What is your favorite weapon and why is it broadsword? Because the broadsword in that game is broken. That's why. What platform is it on? It's definitely on Steam. I wouldn't be surprised. Like I said, most of these indie titles are available on most platforms. I don't know if the Switch has it or not. I wouldn't be surprised, though, if it does, because the Switch has been pretty good for indie games. Somebody with a Switch might have to confirm that, but I know for a fact it's on Steam. The original started out as like an indie hidden gem that kind of blew up when the streamers got a hold of it and became popular on streaming and whatnot and on YouTube. And then the sequel came out, and that's where it is at now. So we're due for another stream of that game. Oh, well, we'll get around to it, Chibi, when the time is right. Just don't you worry about that. We'll get to it. So on to the next game. What do you got? Speaking of popular games online and whatnot, how many of you guys there are fans of Starcraft? Really, we're going to be talking more about real-time strategy games in general, but I figured I'd zero in on one in particular. And to my mind, maybe it's because I'm a little bit older and whatnot, but StarCraft 2 still comes to my mind when I think about the most predominant of real-time strategy games. I found myself just the other night going back through hours of old StarCraft 2 esport tournament footage that I found on YouTube. And in hindsight, I found it a little mind-boggling, actually, how much a video game that I used to just lose hours in my basement playing online with friends and whatnot has turned into something akin to like the video game version of ESPN. Have you guys seen some of those StarCraft tournaments? Wow, they've got like announcers. It's like a sports event. They've got graphics and announcers and sponsors and big like coliseums full of people and whatnot. At least they used to, anyway. It's the definitive real-time strategy experience with over a decade now of expansions and hype behind it. Careers have been built off of mastering it. There are people that make a living playing the game, if you can believe that. And it's got 3 massive standalone single-player campaigns, which I actually just went through recently and replayed just because I wanted to, and they still hold up, if you ask me. Some people may find the game is a little, faded or whatnot, but I still contest that it holds up as good sci-fi stuff. And I'm not usually into big sci-fi genres, but this game I really like, mostly because I like the Zerg. I like aliens. What can I say? It's not hard at all to get swept up in the StarCraft 2 hype or in like the matches as they spiral towards their climax. So with all of that excitement wrapped up in a game like StarCraft 2, you can be thinking, much like what we were talking about with the one-on-one fighting games, it's easy to want to get swept up in that and want to dive into it and get involved and be part of that excitement, So if you're looking to get in on that, what if you're looking to get in on that level of real-time strategy excitement, but again, you're a little intimidated with going head-to-head with somebody in such a massively expansive game with so many units and tactics and metas and strategies, and all that just seems like a little too much for you. What do you do then? Or maybe the sci-fi genre isn't your bag, like you don't dig on the aliens and whatnot. You're looking for something a little bit more down to earth. Well, there's an indie game for that, surprisingly. If you're a fan of StarCraft 2, you might try a game called Tooth and Tail. Tooth and Tail is a real-time strategy game with rodent and woodland creatures. Think of Redwall, but if like it was like a communist civil war, really. That's kind of the vibe we're going for right here. the creatures that you're controlling in this game and the armies that you're controlling in this game are all warring over the game's single resource and its single narrative conceit: meat. The winners eat, the losers are eaten. That's it. That's the plot of the game. And you go along with this pared down sort of narrative. There's a pared down gameplay. Pared down gameplay in the form of simplistic controls. So what I mean by that is the game has come closer, I think, than any other real-time strategy game to actually being playable with a controller. Because in the game, you're not using a cold pointer mouse and 1,000 different keyboard keys to control things. What you're doing instead is you're controlling one leader that's on the field and moving them around and using a controller to command your troops and whatnot. It's a fresh coat of paint on a tried and true genre that most might find a little less of an investment to get into while they're still getting to command their army of rodents and waging wars and whatnot. It plays easy enough and it won't overwhelm you with too much if you're just starting out. So that's Tooth and Tail, and that's what I would recommend for anybody who wants to get in on the excitement of real-time strategy games but doesn't want to learn 100,000 different units and strategies and whatnot. Is there multiplayer for it? I believe so, yeah. And it's available on Steam. Most of these games, the indie games that I'm suggesting, I know for sure are available on Steam because that's the primary platform that I play on. But I think a lot of them are also available on the Switch and maybe on some other consoles as well. So, what do we got next? I imagine there's maybe one or two of you out there that are a fan of this game. It's called Overwatch. Maybe you've heard of it. I don't know how many times I can milk that joke. We'll see. In any case, so Overwatch. Maybe you've heard of it. If you enjoy the fast-paced multiplayer team fights of Overwatch, do you? Do you enjoy getting your team together, getting your crew together, getting your mates together? Like maybe you play with a certain group of people every single time you play Overwatch, and now you've sort of formed your group or whatever, and you want to always you're always looking forward to the next time where you can get all together and push the payload or do whatever it is. I don't play Overwatch, by the way. Somebody else wrote this this part of the script for me, so I'm just doing the best I can here. Or maybe you're in the middle of an Overwatch match and you get excited by the idea of the other team like changing up their strategy, and then your team coming together, formulating a plan, formulating an idea to change up your strategy in order to go along with them. Or like if that's what you're after, there's an indie game for that, and it is not Team Fortress 2. Nope. But there is an indie game for it that maybe some of you haven't heard of. It's based off an old arcade game, actually. If you're a fan of Overwatch, you should try out Killer Queen Black. Killer Queen Black is based on an old arcade game, believe it or not, but it's a 4-on-4 action platformer, and it's all about that teamwork. We're talking about that team. If you have like everybody in your headset or whatever, and you're communicating with everyone, it is all about that because you have to be coordinated in order to play this game. In the match, one person plays as like this queen character who has the power to go over the battlefield and kill other characters and whatnot. And everybody else is kind of playing as either soldier drones or worker drones. It's kind of got a little bit of an insect vibe to it, where you're like trying to win matches by commanding your army and whatnot. So there's queens, workers, soldiers, and you basically have control over a map. You share the map with your opponent's team, and both teams are competing to try and achieve one of 3 goals in order to gain victory. And it's very rapid pace. Again, remember, this is based off on an old arcade game, so it was meant to be fast paced, go, go, go. So how you win in the game is you can either take out the enemy's queen, like attack them. Like the queen is very hard to take out because they can fly all over the place and move around a lot. But if you take out their queen 3 times in a row, you get a victory. Or you could try going for a collection victory. Scattered around the entire map are berries that your team can collect. And if you collect more berries than the other team, then your team wins. Or the third thing you can do is kind of this game's version of pushing the payload, which is riding the snail, apparently, is what it is. Again, like I said, it's got kind of an insect vibe to it. But your team can jump on top of a snail that you'll find throughout the stage and ride it all the way to the other side of the map and then get a victory that way. So how your team decides to get its wins is going to be based off of your coordination and your communication. It doesn't have, the game itself doesn't have the diverse cast of characters. Obviously, we're talking about little bug soldiers and whatnot. I don't even know if they're actually bugs or not, but it's kind of got that vibe. And obviously, there's not a whole lot of lore like there is with something like Overwatch. Same with like cosmetics and whatnot, loot boxes. It doesn't really have all that. Again, based on an arcade game, but it does have that fast-paced action and deep strategy down. Like, you will get that for sure. And especially if you play round after round with the same team, you'll begin to learn how to communicate with your teammates and whatnot. And that can be very rewarding. But if you're, so like, say, for example, that you're in a match and you're falling behind and collecting berries, then you can tell some of your teammates, say if you're in command or whatever, to switch up to attackers and go after their queen or whatever. Or maybe say their team is focused on going after your queen, then you can just, you know, leave her to try and fend for herself and just pile on the snail and push that payload all the way to victory, you know? So you have to be aware of what your team's up to. You have to be aware of what the other team's up to, and you have to be able to adapt to both sides of the strategy of the battlefield if you want to grab victory. It's a great indie game that can give you the same high as a satisfying Overwatch match. We've said over and over it's based off of an old arcade game. It's a little bit different, though. I believe the indie game that's available on Steam, I believe, as well. I don't know if it's on any other platforms. It might be on the Switch. I'm not sure. It's 5-on-5, I guess, as opposed to the arcade game, which was 4-on-4. But that's kind of a.
It's the other way around, Dan.
It's the other way around, Dan. Thank you. All right. So
and also the arcade game's not that old. It came out in 2013. Okay. It's actually like two arcade machines put next to each other that have 5 player controls.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, one's blue and one's green, and one's blue and one's yellow. Yeah.
Have you ever found an arcade cabinet of that in the wild?
I've seen it at Magfests before, but that's about it.
Well, I imagine that, you know, arcades kind of declining the way they are over the last decade or so or whatever. It'll be harder and harder to find the arcade version of this game out in the wild. So that's why jumping onto the indie version of it is fantastic. And if you're looking for that team-based action experience, Killer Queen Black, that's what we would recommend.
Also, it is on Switch, and there is cross-play.
Ooh. Cross-play with the Steam version. There you go.
Yeah.
Sounds like chess with bugs. Yeah, a little bit more of a rapid-paced version of chess with bugs. But you're not wrong. Yeah. And the crossplay thing is fantastic. I love games that have, like, especially indie team-based games that have crossplay, or competitive multiplayer games that have crossplay. Because, you know, half of my friends game more on the Switch than they do on Steam and so on. So it's good to have that cross compatibility so that everybody, all your friends, can get in on the gaming fun times. So that's Killer Queen Black. What's next? Ooh, anybody like the Batman Arkham games? Everybody wants to be Batman. Absolutely everybody wants, well, those except those of you who want to be Spider-Man, that is. But the point is, there's an unmistakable allure to donning the cape and the cowl and striking at bad guys from the shadows with cool gadgets and cunning skills. It almost makes you feel like you're a badass ninja. Wait, Batman was trained by ninjas. I guess that makes sense. Well, on that note, there's an indie game for that. Wanting to feel like a badass ninja, you should definitely check out Mark of the Ninja. In Mark of the Ninja, you don't get a cape and cowl, sadly, but you do get to be a badass ninja. And just like the Dark Knight, you'll be using all kinds of quick thinking, deadly tools, and superior combat abilities to slink around in the shadows and strike at foes when they least expect it. The indie game title is set more in a 2D stage-by-stage setup rather than the extensive sandboxes of Gotham or Arkham Asylum, but you're still given lots of room to move around, and make no mistake, you're a deadly ninja. You definitely can move around in this game. You can leap and dive and duck from shadow to shadow and approach the enemy encounters in several different ways. It is one of the best stealth indie games I think I've ever played. And make no mistake, the enemies that you're going up against is an army of enemies that you do not want to take head on. You want to use all the tricks of the trade that you have available at your disposal to take these guys on. Because even though you're like a traditional old school cloaked in black ninja, whatever, the enemies that you're fighting are armed to the teeth with like modern day military weaponry, guns, lasers, smoke bombs, attack dogs, security cameras, the works. So you're definitely going to have to rely in this game more on distraction, subterfuge, and silent takedowns. The presentation of the game is also gorgeous as well. It's got a hand-drawn art style versus the new sort of narrative in the game. Sorry, I lost my spot in my script here. Sorry. The setting of the game is very much reminiscent of the old Cartoon Network show Samurai Jack. The art style as well, because it's you're an old school Japanese warrior in modern times fighting off modern day armies and whatnot. But the art style, again, like I said, is fantastic. Your enemies don't ragdoll around like they did in the Batman games when you knock guys out and they just sort of flop down on the ground. In this game, there's a lot of hand-drawn animation added in to make every single takedown that you do look really juicy and satisfying. And the kills play out with unique animations, and it's just really cool to look at, and really adds to the feeling of feeling like a badass when you're playing through it. So if you're looking for something more exciting than just beating up the same clown over and over again, Mark of the Ninja, which is actually currently enjoying a second wind right now, as it was just remastered, I think 2 or 3 years ago, because the game itself came out like 4 or 5 years ago, but it just got a remaster, so it was bumped up to like full HD resolution. All the art was remastered and whatnot, so it's got kind of a second wind, at least on Steam and whatever other platforms. Again, I imagine this has to be out on the Switch and possibly some other platforms if you want to check that out. And what else can I say? It will make you feel like a badass ninja if you play through this game, especially if you're into stealth type games. There's nothing cooler, and I've enjoyed many an hour of playing through this game and feeling like a badass video ninja. It's out on everything and remastered for 4K for sure. Is it on sale? I imagine it goes on sale during all the Steam sales and whatnot. So, yep. You've never played it, but you will. It's a good game to play. On to what I believe is our last title that we have to talk about here tonight. How many of you guys are fans of a game called Dragon Age? Everyone knows why people play Dragon Age. And there's a reason why it's just so unbelievably popular and everybody plays it. It's obviously to romance your fellow party members. Why else would you play a game like this, right? BioWare really should just make a dating sim already and get rid of the RPG elements and stories about war. What we all are demanding, BioWare, is a 40-hour Dragon Age dating sim. That's what we want. Why don't you listen to us and give us what we want? Oh, wait, we don't have to wait for you to give us what we want because there's an indie for that. If you're a fan of Dragon Age, or at least a certain part of Dragon Age, you might want to try out Monster Prom. Monster Prom is a competitive dating sim for 1 to 4 players. Players raise their stats and make decisions in an attempt to take their favorite character to the prom. And since you're all Dragon Age fans, we know what kind of characters you want to romance, Iron Bull and Solaris. Well, Monster Prom has many different types of monsters to romance. There's the hipster vampire. There is a party ghost by the name of Polygeist. Yes, all the names are like that. In fact, most of the humor is like that too. If you can get on that wavelength, you'll be fine. And there's much, much more monsters for you to try and romance. Something for every one of your deviant tastes. There's obviously a little bit of some differences between Dragon Age and Monster Prom. I almost said Magus Age. I don't know why. Dragon Age is a 40-hour long game with a continuous story, whereas Monster Prom is more like a 1 to 2 hour bite-sized play session, which can be replayed numerous times. Once you finished one run, for example, trying to romance the jock werewolf Scott Howell, who's a fan favorite of the game, you can then try to maybe romance the sentient library computer named Calculuster Hewlett Packard. I said... yeah, the names are pretty much all like that. There's even secret story paths. Some of the characters, like if you look at some of the trailers and you don't see a particular monster that strikes your fancy, you should play the game anyway, because there's hidden monsters that you may not know about that you might be able to find and take to the Monster Prom. It's also a multiplayer game too. You can play this with 4 different players, and it becomes kind of even like a competitive sort of thing there, where like several people can get their sights set on the same monster at the same time. And then it becomes, a dangerous challenge to try and romance a monster of your choosing away from your friends or whatever. And you might get into arguments and scuffles, and there might be death and carnage, just like real high school. So if you enjoy Dragon Age, but you want to skip all the war and battling stuff, and you're just there for the sexy times with sexy monsters, give Monster Prom a try. In fact, you might even try out the several spin-off games that they've got coming out for Monster Prom. There's one out already called Monster Camp, which involves trying to take your monster fling to a fun summer camp romance evening, watching a meteor shower. And they've got several other games coming down the line as well that will probably keep all of us busy and reading the insanely hilarious dialogue and writing in these games, which, by the way, we should probably also mention, not exactly kid-friendly, just in case anybody gets that impression. But nevertheless, it's a good time for all of you out there looking to romance some monsters. Game looks so cute. It is very cute. Zeki art is very cute, for sure. Now redo the Monster Prom part of this, but it's Scott. Yeah, those of you who have seen me do the Monster Prom streams on my Twitch channel with my friends, what you'll often do is that even though some of the characters in the game have voice acting, you'll often find yourself wanting to read parts out in the voices of some of the characters, and that could be a fun night with a couple of drinks and some good friends around, even if you're just hanging out on like a Twitch chat or a Discord or whatever, doing fun stuff like that. So that pretty much marks the end of the games that we had listed there. Hopefully everybody got a taste of some indie games that maybe you'll want to try down the line. If you want to jump into the chat now with any questions that maybe you've been holding on to tonight, or if you've got any suggestions of games that kind of sound like the stuff that we were talking about up until now. I think we've got maybe about 5-10 minutes or so before the panel winds down here, and we can just sort of get that out there as well. Hashtag needs more Scott Howell voice. Oh, you guys are really putting me on the spot here, aren't you? I'd go to a dragon prom. Yeah, I don't know if there is a dragon character in Monster Prom. Now that I think about it, we know that there's a werewolf character and a ghost and a mermaid princess as well available. There's also like a Medusa type character in there. Very fun stuff. I've been playing Super Mario World on the Switch, and it has a rewind function. Yes, a lot of indie games that are based off of old like platformers and whatnot, when they get remastered on games on things like Switch and whatnot, they usually come with a rewind function just to sort of take the NES hard edge off of playing a lot of those old games. I remember the Disney Afternoon remake that came out on Steam that had those 4 Capcom platformers based off of Rescue Rangers and Darkwing Duck that had a rewind function in it. Some of those old Mega Man games that got remastered and put on Steam that had a rewind function in it as well. So that's just starting to become a very common quality of life function that gets put into a lot of indie games that are based off of old school like NES hard platformers and whatnot.
To answer Rin's question, I suggested the Overwatch and Killer Queen Black one, as well as technically I suggested the Dragon Age Monster Prom one. One of my suggestions that Dan didn't want to do was if you like The Last of Us, you should play Death Road to Canada. Because
that's a hilarious idea, but I don't know that I could write out an entire paragraph justifying it.
Well, Death Road to Canada also has zombies and a great narrative. There was the one time that Dan had a muscle off with a bunch of gang people trying to kill us, and he won. So by rules of the muscle off, we were allowed to pass.
Yep. We broed down with them, and did the flex check, and I apparently passed it, and so. Rules of the road, they let us pass.
And we also you can make characters in the game. Oh yeah, and the time Vicky punched a moose.
Vicky did punch a moose, yes. I remember that.
And you can also make all the characters in the game, you customize them yourself, so you can make all your friends and stuff, so you can actually care if you find them, and also you care about them if they die. To the zombies as you're trying to make your way to Canada. So it has that narrative feel where you actually care about the characters, just like The Last of Us.
Yeah.
So I think it's a great suggestion.
It's also a little bit more appealing for those of you who are like roguelikes, because it's a bit more of a roguelite as well, as opposed to the rigid gameplay of The Last of Us 2, for sure. I remember dying in one playthrough. A lot of people remember dying in Death Road to Canada. It is a challenging game, yes. Does Audio Surf count as an indie game? I would say so, yeah. Audio Surf is pretty good. Those of you who are like maybe jonesing for like a throwback to the stuff like Guitar Hero and Rock Band and whatnot, Audio Surf is kind of like that. It's surfing through your music library and trying to collect things along the way, for sure. Evil Incorporated says Death Road to Canada is such an amazing game. It is, for sure. Absolutely. It's actually by the developers of a mobile game that I used to play a long time ago that I can't remember the name of, but it involved a lot of punching. I remember that.
You also had the suggestion for Hearthstone.
Yes, one of the suggestions of games that didn't quite make the list. We were trying to aim for about a solid 10 entries on the list here, but one of the suggestions that we had was if you like Hearthstone, you might want to try out an indie game that Tricky and I have been playing a lot in our downtime lately, called Monster Train. It's a deck building roguelite, very much akin to games like Slay the Spire or FTL or things like that, where you are piloting a train through hell, trying to, because hell is frozen over and all the angels are down in hell being dicks and whatnot, and you have to try and get the train with the last bit of hellfire on it to the center of hell and battling your way through angels. And it's a very accessible type game because, like I said, it's a deck building type game. It's got the same level of accessibility like Slay the Spire had, where you start off with a hand that's very easy to understand, and then you just sort of add cards into it as you play through. And it takes you maybe 30-40 minutes or so to do each run, so each run's not too long, and there's a lot of replayability to the game. And it's got an expansion coming out at the end of this month, if I'm not mistaken. There's new content coming for that as well, so that's one that I also definitely wanted to put on everybody's radar. It's called Monster Train. Definitely look it up. Another one that I definitely wanted to also mention when we were talking about the Zelda stuff and Minute and whatnot, a game that I contemplated comparing Zelda to instead of Minute was an indie game called Carto. Check that out if you're more into like the exploration and adventure-y side of games like Zelda and not so much into like combat and puzzle. Well, there's puzzle solving in it, but it's an adorable little indie game about basically building your own map as you explore a fantasy land. Indonesian developed game, I believe it's called. It's on the Switch. It's on Steam. Definitely check that out. What other game? Oh, there's some other, Dicey Dungeon's another one that, much like Monster Train and Slay the Spire, another one that's kind of roguelite, less of a deck building game, more of a kind of like a Yahtzee type game. But think of Yahtzee if it was a dungeon crawler, because you're rolling dice and you're trying to assign each dice that you roll into certain slots to do certain attacks or make certain things happen. So Dicey Dungeon's another one that I would recommend for sure. Enter the Gungeon is a good twin stick shooter roguelite as well. It's also recently had a spin-off game, Exit the Dungeon, I believe, which is more of a 2D shooter. Tricky's played that one more than I have. And another Zelda-like game, if you also kind of like Hollow Knight, is Blue Fire. Blue Fire I have not heard of. That's one that I've not heard of as well. So, yep. Actually, no, I think I have heard of that one. I might be confusing it with something else that I've maybe played recently. But it's not too hard to find indie games that trace their lineage back to the games like Legend of Zelda and whatnot. Rags is also suggesting if you're into other indie games, if you are, say, a fan of old school Bomberman type games, you might also try Invisigun Heroes, even though it plays a little bit different. But think of Bomberman, except all the characters are invisible, so you can't see yourself or any other players. And you're not exactly dropping line bombs, you're just shooting guns. But still, the main conceit of the game is that you're invisible, the other players are invisible, and you have to try and play the game without knowing where you are, where the other players are. It's become a really popular game with streamers as well, because it has accessibility issues, or features rather, not issues, that allow people that are watching your stream to know where your characters are, but the players still don't. So definitely recommended for that one. Antichamber could work for Portal fans. I've played Antichamber as well. Yep, Antichamber is much like Portal. It's even more abstract than Portal, I would say, because Portal was grounded in the mechanics of the portal gun, and Superliminal, which we talked about earlier in the panel, is grounded more in the rules of changing the size of things and perspective rules. But Antichamber is kind of like a puzzle, first-person puzzle type game, like those, where there really aren't any rules. You have to like it's kind of like a logic puzzle game without any logic. So it can be a little bit of a tougher sell for people who, other than hardcore puzzle fanatics who really like to grind their brain down and try and figure out puzzle type games that don't really do any hand holding for you. Light Matter is also very Portal-like. Not heard of that one. Manifold Garden, not heard of that one either.
Clay Ghoul, I'm not sure. I haven't actually played Evil Geniuses, but if you want to take a look, you might want to try The Escapists, which is like a prison escape game. It might play the same way. I'm not 100% sure. But give that one a look and see if that one fits your bill.
Yeah. I believe I just saw some sort of new content for The Escapists come out as well. I've not played Evil Genius either. I do know of The Escapists though. It's multiplayer as well, I believe. For those of you who like the quick defeat your friend games like Needhog, there's also Duck Game. Yes, Duck Game is kind of like Needhog 2 if it was a bit more Smash Brothers, I think, because it's more than just one-on-one. It's more team versus, or it's a free-for-all, really. But it's very fast-paced, like one-hit kills, last man standing sort of Needhog 2 matches. That's what you're going to get with Duck Game. It has a lot of really funny and hilarious customization and funny skins in it as well, much like Needhog 2 does. Evil Incorporated also suggests War for the Overworld, very much like Evil Genius. There you go. Towerfall Ascension, very much like Duck Game as well, actually, now that I think about it. Free for all, every man for themselves. Towerfall Ascension is more jumping around and firing arrows that you have to go and then pick up to fire again if you're looking for that sort of thing. Feel like we should be writing all these down for people to investigate later. I imagine if people want a refresher on any of these, myself, I'm going to be in the Kanji Discord for the majority of the weekend. Jump into like the video game discussion channel or any of those and ask for suggestions or whatever, or post your suggestions, because I'd love to hear from them if you've got links or whatever. Maybe don't spam a whole lot of links or whatever, but if you were looking for more suggestions on that, you can find myself and probably some of the rest of us in the Kanji Discord throughout the weekend. We'd love to talk more games with the lot of you. Try again, Tricky. I don't think your audio quite came through there.
I was thinking of one more that I was thinking of that we suggested was if you like Shadow of the Colossus, you might like Titan Soul.
Ah, yes.
Which is also another boss rush kind of game where you're a guy with an arrow. And basically you just have to hit the enemy once, but trying to hit the enemy once is just really hard with that arrow.
Yeah. So,
and you're fighting giant monster bosses kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh man, Shadow of the Colossus, that takes me back. Lots of indie games out there to suggest. And I would ask everybody if you want to continue on the discussion, we jump into the Discord. We're going to wrap things up here, though. Special thanks, of course, to Tricky for helping out with the visual aid, as well as everybody in the chat here for posting all of those reminders on what system games are on and whatnot. But
for my coffee.
We're going to close it down here for the time being. We're going to let you guys have a bit of a breather here, and we're going to get set up for the next panel, which I think is thermoplastics and whatnot. So everybody should stick around in the Kanji Twitch for that, because it's going to be a good time. It's going to be answering a lot of questions, like what Orbital is. I still don't. Thanks, Tricky.
Thank you very much, Tricky and Dan, for coming and doing the panel for us.
Thank you.
And thank you for all of our Twitch streamers
Bye.
and stuff like that are watching. You guys rock. Yep. All right. Goodbye, you lovely gentlemen. Take care.